Chapter 17. Elizabeth was odd. She had been in her father's Zurich headquarters often, but always as a visitor. The power belonged to him, and now it belonged to her. She looked around the huge office and felt like an imposter. The room had been magnificently decorated by Ernst Holl. At one end stood a Roentgen cabinet with a millet landscape over it. There was a fireplace, and in front of it a chamois leather couch, a large coffee table, and 4 easy chairs. Around the walls were Renoirs, Chagalls, Klees, and 2 early Courbets. The desk was a solid block of black mahogany. Next to it, on a large console table, was a communications complex, a battery of telephones with direct lines to company headquarters around the world. There were 2 red phones with scramblers, an intricate intercom system, a ticker tape machine, and other equipment. Hanging behind the desk was a portrait of old Samuel Roth. A private door led to a large dressing room, with cedar closets and lined drawers. Someone had removed Sam's clothing, and Elizabeth was grateful. She walked through a tiled bathroom that included a marble bathtub and a stall shower. There were fresh Turkish towels hanging on warming racks. The medicine chest was empty. All the daily paraphernalia of her father's life had been taken away. Kate Erling, probably. Elizabeth idly wondered whether Kate had been in love with Sam. The executive suite included a large sauna, a fully equipped gymnasium, a barber shop, and a dining room that could seat 100 people. When foreign guests were being entertained, a little flag representing their country was placed in the floral centerpiece of the table. In addition, there was Sam's private dining room, tastefully decorated, with muraled walls. Kate Erling had explained to Elizabeth, "There are 2 chefs on duty during the day, and 1 at night. If you are having more than 12 guests for luncheon or dinner, they need 2 hours' notice." Now Elizabeth sat at the desk, piled high with papers, memoranda, and statistics and reports, and she did not know where to begin. She thought of her father sitting there, in this chair, behind this desk, and she was suddenly filled with a sense of unbearable loss. Sam had been so able, so brilliant. How she needed him now. Elizabeth had managed to see Alec for a few moments before he returned to London. "Take your time," he advised her. "Don't let anyone pressure you." So he had sensed her feelings. "Alec, do you think I should vote to let the company go public?" He had smiled at her and said awkwardly, "I'm afraid I do, old girl. But then I've got my own axe to grind, haven't I? Our shares are no good to any of us until we can sell them. That's up to you now." Elizabeth was remembering that conversation as she sat alone in the huge office. The temptation to telephone Alec was overpowering. All she had to say was, "I've changed my mind," and get out. She did not belong here. She felt inadequate. She looked at the set of intercom buttons on the console. Opposite one of them was the name Rhys Williams. Elizabeth debated a moment, then flicked down the switch. Rhys was seated across from her, watching her. Elizabeth knew exactly what he must be thinking, what they were all thinking, that she had no business being there. "That was quite a bomb you dropped at the meeting this morning," Rhys said. "I'm sorry if I upset everyone." He grinned. "Upset is hardly the word. You put everyone in a state of shock. It was all supposed to have been cut and dried. The publicity releases were ready to send out." He studied her a moment. "What made you decide not to sign, Liz?" How could she explain that it was nothing more than a feeling? An intuition? He would laugh at her. And yet Sam had refused to let Roth and Sons go public. She had to find out why. As though reading her thoughts, Rhys said, "Your great-great-grandfather set this up as a family business, to keep away outsiders. But it was a small company then. Things have changed. We're running one of the biggest drugstores in the world. Whoever sits in your father's chair has to make all the final decisions. It's one hell of a responsibility." She looked at him and wondered whether this was Rhys's way of telling her to get out. "Will you help me?" "You know I will." She felt a rush of relief, and she realized how much she had been counting on him. "The first thing we'd better do," Rhys said, is to take you on a tour of the plant here. Do you know about the physical structure of this company? Not much. That was not true. Elizabeth had been in enough meetings with Sam over the past few years to have picked up a good deal of knowledge about workings of Roth and Sons. But she wanted to hear it from Reese's point of view. We manufacture much more than drugs, Liz. We make chemicals and perfumes and vitamins and hairspray and pesticides. We produce cosmetics and bioelectronic instruments. We have a food division and a division of animal nitrates. Elizabeth was aware of all that, but she let Reese go on. We publish magazines for distribution to doctors. We make adhesives and building protection agents and plastic explosives. Elizabeth could sense that he was becoming caught up by what he was saying. She could hear the undertone of pride in his voice, and she was oddly reminded of her father. Roth and Sons owns factories and holding companies in over 100 countries. Every one of them report to this office. He paused, as though to make sure that she understood the point. Old Samuel went into business with a horse in a test tube. It's grown to 60 factories around the world, 10 research centers, and a network of thousands of salesmen and detail men and women. They were the ones, Elizabeth knew, who called on the doctors and hospitals. Last year, in the United States alone, they spent over $14 billion on drugs, and we have a healthy share of that market. And yet Roth and Sons was in trouble with the banks? Something was wrong. Reese took Elizabeth on a tour of the company's headquarters factory. In actuality, the Zurich division was a dozen factories, with 75 buildings on 60 acres of ground. It was a world in microcosm, completely self-sustaining. They visited the manufacturing plants, the research departments, the toxicology laboratories, the storage plants. Reese brought Elizabeth to a sound stage where they made motion pictures for research and for their worldwide advertising and products division. We use more film here, Reese told Elizabeth, than the major Hollywood studios. They went through the molecular biology department and the liquid center, where 50 giant stainless steel glass-lined tanks hung suspended from the ceiling, filled with liquids ready to be bottled. They saw the tablet compression rooms, where powders were formed in the tablets, sized, stamped with the Roth and Sons, packaged and labeled, without anyone ever touching them. Some of the drugs were ethical products, available only on prescription. Others were proprietary items, sold over the counter. Set apart from the other buildings were several small buildings. These were for the scientists, the analytical chemists, the biochemists, organic chemists, parasitologists, pathologists. More than 300 scientists work here, Reese told Elizabeth. Most of them are PhDs. Would you like to see our $100 million room? Elizabeth nodded, intrigued. It was in an isolated brick building, guarded by a uniformed policeman with a gun. Reese showed his security pass, and he and Elizabeth were permitted to enter a long corridor with a steel door at the end of it. The guard used 2 keys to open the door, and Elizabeth and Reese entered. The room contained no windows. It was lined from floor to ceiling with shelves filled with every variety of bottles, jars, and tubes. Why do they call this the $100 million room? Elizabeth asked. Because that's what it costs to furnish it. See all those compounds on the shelves? None of them have names, only numbers. They are the ones that didn't make it. They are the failures. But 100 million? For every new drug that works, there are about 1,000 that end up in this room. Some drugs are worked on for as long as 10 years and then abandoned. A single drug can cost $5 or $10 million in research before we find out that it's no good, or that someone else has beaten us to it. We don't throw any of these things away because now and then one of our bright young men will back into a discovery that can make something in this room valuable. The amounts of money involved were awesome. Come on, Reese said. I'll show you the lost room. It was in another building, this one unguarded, containing, like the other rooms, only shelves filled with bottles and jars. We lose a fortune here too, Reese said, but we plan it that way. I don't understand. Reese walked over to a shelf and picked up a bottle. It was labeled botulism. Do you know how many cases of botulism there were in the United States last year? 25. But it costs us millions of dollars to keep this drug in stock. He picked up another bottle at random. This is an antidote for rabies. This room is full of drugs that are cures for rare diseases, snake bites, poisonous plants. We furnish them free to the armed forces and to hospitals as public service. I like that, Elizabeth said. Old Samuel would have liked it too, she thought. Reese took Elizabeth to the capsule rooms, where empty bottles were carried in on a giant conveyor belt. By the time they had crossed the room, the bottles had been sterilized, filled with capsules, labeled, topped with cotton, and sealed, all done by automation. There was a glass-blowing factory, an architectural center to plan new buildings, a real estate division to acquire the land for them. In one building there were scores of writers turning out pamphlets in 50 languages and printing presses to print them. Some of the departments reminded Elizabeth of George Orwell's 1984. The sterile rooms were bathed in eerie ultraviolet lights. Adjoining rooms were painted in different colors, white, green, or blue, and the workers wore uniforms to match them. Each time they entered or left the room, they had to go through a special sterilization chamber. Blue workers were locked in for the entire day. Before they could eat or rest or go to the toilet, they had to undress, enter a neutral green zone, put on other clothes, and reverse the process when they returned. I think you'll find this interesting, Reese said. They were walking down the gray corridor of a research building. They reached a door marked, "Restricted, do not enter." Reese pushed the door open, and he and Elizabeth walked through. They went through a second door, and Elizabeth found herself in a dimly lit room filled with hundreds of cages containing animals. The room was hot and humid, and she felt as if she had suddenly been transported to a jungle. As her eyes grew accustomed to the half-light, she saw the cages were filled with monkeys and hamsters and cats and white mice. Many of the animals had obscene-looking growths protruding from various parts of their bodies. Some of their heads were shaven and were crowned with electrodes that had been implanted in their brains. Some of the animals were screaming and gibbering, racing around in their cages, while others were comatose and lethargic. The noise and the stench were unbearable. It was like some kind of hell. Elizabeth walked up to a cage that contained a single white kitten. Its brain was exposed, enclosed in a clear plastic covering through which protruded half a dozen wires. What's going on here?" Elizabeth asked. A tall, bearded young man making notes in front of a cage explained, "We're testing a new tranquilizer." "I hope it works," Elizabeth said weakly. "I think I could use it." And she walked out of the room before she could become sick. Reese was at her side in the corridor. "Are you all right?" She took a deep breath. I'm fine. Is all that really necessary?" Reese looked at her and replied, "Those experiments save a lot of lives. More than one-third of people born since 1950 are alive only because of modern drugs. Think about that." Elizabeth thought about it. It took 6 full days to tour the key buildings, and when Elizabeth had finished, she was exhausted, her head spinning with the vastness of it. And she realized she was seeing just one raw plant. There were dozens of others scattered around the world. The facts and figures were stunning. It takes between 5 and 10 years to market a new drug, and out of every 2,000 compounds tested, we'll average only 3 products. And Roth & Sons has 300 people working here in quality control alone. And worldwide, Roth & Sons is responsible for over 500,000 employees. And our gross income last year was... Elizabeth listened, trying to digest the incredible figures that Reese was throwing at her. She had known that the company was large, but large was such an anonymous word. Having it actually translated into terms of people and money was staggering. That night, as Elizabeth lay in bed, recalling all the things she had seen and heard, she was filled with an overpowering feeling of inadequacy. Evil. "Believe me, Sarah, it is much better to leave all this to us. You don't understand these things." "Alec, I think you should sell, but I have an axe to grind." "Walter, why bother yourself with this? You can go off anywhere you like and enjoy your money." They were all right, all of them, Elizabeth thought. I'm going to get out and let them do what they like with the company. I do not belong in this position. The moment she made the decision, she felt a deep sense of relief. She fell asleep almost immediately. The following day, Friday, was the beginning of a holiday weekend. When Elizabeth arrived at the office, she sent for Reese to announce her decision. Mr. Williams had to fly to Nairobi last night, Kate Erling informed her. He said to tell you he would be back on Tuesday. Can anyone else help you? Elizabeth hesitated. Put in a call to Sir Alec, please. Yes, Miss Roth, Kate added, a note of hesitation in her voice. A package for you was delivered this morning by the police department. It contains the personal belongings your father had with him at Chamonix. The mention of Sam brought back the sharp sense of loss, of grief. The police apologized because they could not give it to your messenger. It was already on its way to you. Elizabeth frowned. My messenger? The man you sent to Chamonix to pick it up. I didn't send anyone to Chamonix. It was obviously some bureaucratic mix-up. Where is it? I put it in your closet. There was a Vuitton suitcase containing Sam's clothes and a locked attaché case with a key tapped to it. Probably company reports. She would let Reese handle them. Then she remembered that he was away. Well, she decided she would go away for the weekend too. She looked at the attaché case and thought, perhaps there's something personal belonging to Sam. I'd better look at it first. Kate Erling buzzed. I'm sorry, Miss Roth. Sir Alec's out of the office. Leave a message for him to call me, please. I'll be at the villa in Sardinia. Leave the same message for Mr. Palazzi, Mr. Gassner, and Mr. Martel. She would tell them all that she was leaving, that they could sell the stock, do as they pleased with the company. She was looking forward to the long weekend. The villa was a retreat, a soothing cocoon, where she could be alone to think about herself and her future. Events had been flung at her so rapidly that she had had no chance to put things into any kind of perspective. Sam's accident. Elizabeth's mind tripped over the word death, inheriting the controlling stock of Robinsons, the urgent pressure from the family to let the company go public. And the company itself, the awesome heartbeat of the behemoth whose power spanned the world. It was too much to cope with all at once. When she flew to Sardinia late that afternoon, she had the attaché case with her.